Friction. Introduction. The phenomenon which opposes the relative motion between two surfaces is called friction. Friction is a force which comes into play only when two surfaces are in contact. The force of friction always opposes the motion of an object. It tends to stop a moving object. It also tends to prevent a stationary object from moving. We can therefore define friction as a force that slows down moving objects or prevents stationary objects from moving. The frictional force between two surfaces depends on shape, texture, and mass of the objects in contact. Types of friction. Friction is of 4 types. Rolling friction. It acts when one object is trying to roll over a long surface. Sliding friction. It acts in the direction opposite to the direction of motion. This is the minimum force that is required to keep the object moving at constant speed. Due to this, it is easier to push a moving box as compared to push a static box. Static friction. It prevents an object from moving against a surface. Fluid resistance. It acts upon objects as they travel through fluid, liquid, or gas. Causes of friction. Friction comes into play because of the following factors. A surface which is rough, has many grooves, and is irregular is said to have a greater friction. Movement of objects on such a surface would rather be difficult. If, on the other hand, the surface on which the movement has to take place is smooth, the friction experienced by an object is less. Let us consider the following example to understand this. Example: if you ride a bicycle on a rough road, it covers a short distance after we stop pedaling. But if the bicycle moves on a smooth tar road, it covers a longer distance before it stops. This clearly shows that the friction is more when the surface is rough and friction is less when the surface is smooth. The friction depends on the interlocking of two surfaces. If the force of adhesion is greater than the force of cohesion, the friction is more and vice versa. A third factor that affects friction is the force exerted by the object. The greater the force, the greater is the friction. This is the reason that it is difficult to move a heavy table than a light table. Friction is necessary to keep a ladder against a wall. The ladder will not find a grip against the wall in the absence of friction. Experiencing friction in daily life. Friction has both the advantages and disadvantages. Some of these are listed here. Advantages of friction. The friction between our feet or shoes enables us to push our feet against the ground. We would otherwise slip in our attempt to walk. Walking on ice or a very smooth surface becomes difficult due to less friction between our shoes and the ground. The friction between the tires and the road enables the movement of vehicle on the road. Brakes work on the phenomenon of friction. On applying brakes, the brake shoe rubs against the wheels. Now, friction comes into play and reduces the speed of the vehicle. Matchsticks are lit on being rubbed against the outer side of the matchbox, which offers friction. We can write on the paper using a pen or pencil due to friction. Nails and screws are held to the objects due to friction. Disadvantages of friction. The objects in contact require more force to overcome friction between their rubbing surfaces. This results in wastage of energy. Friction causes wear and tear on the rubbing surfaces. The tires of the vehicles, the sole of our shoes are some of the examples of wear and tear. Friction causes heat. It increases the temperature of many parts of the machine, which might be harmful at times. Proper cooling should be done to avoid the breakdown of the machine. Reducing friction. The main cause behind friction is the roughness of the surfaces in contact. Thus, anything that is capable of reducing the roughness between surfaces can reduce friction. Some methods of reducing friction are given below. Using wheels and ball bearings. Vehicles have wheels to facilitate their motion. Luggage also have wheels. As rolling friction is less than sliding friction, it is for this reason that ball bearings are used in parts of machines to reduce friction. Polishing. Friction is reduced on polishing the surface as it becomes smooth. Lubrication. Applying a lubricating substance like oil or grease reduces friction. The friction between the surface of the object and the layer of lubricant is much less. In some cases, parts of machines get heated up too much and reach a very high temperature. In such a situation, graphite may be used as a lubricant. Streamlining the object. On streamlining the objects, we can minimize the fluid friction. The frictional force exerted by fluids is called drag. Friction is minimum for streamlined shape, which is narrow in front and broad at the back. Birds, fishes, aeroplanes, missiles, rockets, and cars have streamlined body to reduce friction. Friction due to air is called air resistance. Here is an activity to prove that friction depends upon the nature of the surface in contact. Take a ball and roll it on the cemented floor. Measure the distance covered by the ball. Repeat this activity on a rough, kacha surface and measure the distance covered by the ball. The ball should be rolled with the same force. On which floor did the ball cover longer distance? It will cover a larger distance on the cemented floor because the frictional force between the cemented floor and the ball is less. So, we can conclude that friction depends upon roughness or smoothness of the surface in contact and vice versa. Increasing friction. At times, friction becomes a necessity. In such cases, we need to increase the friction, which is done in the following ways. Grooves are made on tires to increase friction between the road and the tires. This prevents the vehicles from slipping. During rainy season, sand is spread on slippery roads to prevent the vehicles from any kind of accidents. Athletes wear shoes with spikes to increase their grip on the ground. Gymnasts rub a coarse substance on their hands to improve their grip. Other than friction between solid parts, there can also be friction due to fluids, air and water. The force of friction due to air and water is called fluid friction. When cars and aeroplanes move at a very high speeds, their motion is opposed by friction offered by the air molecules surrounding them. The friction of air is called drag, which opposes the motion of the vehicle. To reduce drag, automobiles, ships, and aeroplanes are given a special shape called streamlined shape. An automobile with streamlined body experiences maximum resistance when traveling through a fluid like air.